Hi, everyone. I'm Judy, the YouTube lawyer here this evening with another live stream legal show. Tonight, our guest is going to be Greensboro attorney John O'Neill, who is a graduate of UNC School of Law. So he's going to talk to us about consumer law, your rights as a consumer, and his legal career doing litigation for over 25 years. So let's welcome Mr. O'Neill. Hi, John.
Hey Judy, how are you? Thanks for having me on this evening.
Sure. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on the show. And you did mention on Facebook that you recently won a big jury trial, right?
I did. It wasn't a
Mhm.
huge jury trial in terms of the amount of money, but it was nice. I can kind of compress the facts of it if you
Sure.
need me to. Very briefly, I represented a gentleman. He lives in Nevada, and so to really compress the facts, he and his ex-wife were feuding about a 2008 Honda Accord vehicle and the title to it. And so his wife had the title, and she gave the title to their adult son with the intent the son was going to get the title. Then the son moves out to Nevada with my client and agrees to sign the title over to my client. And my client says he did that. My client took the title to the Nevada DMV, had the title then issued in his name. And then a year after that, his ex goes to the DMV here and falsely tells him that she lost the title, which resulted in my client's Nevada title getting canceled. And this was in
Mhm.
2018. So
Mhm.
since then, he's had this vehicle in his driveway with no tags, no license, no title, can't move it, can't insure it. And so we were fighting to get him the title back.
Mhm.
And we convinced the jury that she wrongfully had his title canceled, and the jury agreed to pay him compensatory damages. I'm sorry, and they awarded attorney's fees, and they
Mhm.
specifically said that she was to do everything needed to get the title in his name as soon as possible. So my
Mhm.
client had to fly out from Nevada for the trial, which took about 2 days. He wasn't very happy about coming out, but he was very pleased with the result. So at this
Mhm.
point, this week, I've got to track down the trial judge to get him to sign the judgment. And then we hope to get the title transferred by the beginning of February. And then it'll be
Mhm.
just be a matter of collecting on the judgment. So
Yeah, that's the scary part is that do you think you're going to be able to collect? I don't know if you can talk about that or is that confidential?
no, no, it's not confidential.
Mhm.
I think that we probably will be able to collect. And the interesting thing about this case was, is right after we filed suit, I sent a letter to defense counsel before they even filed an answer in an effort to resolve the case. And for
Mhm.
the following 2.5 years, defense counsel would always put us off, never talk about settlement. And then when he did get around to that, he said his client didn't have any interest in doing it. Now, his client has some interest in working out a resolution short of the judgment amount. I think the problem is that she has some real estate in her name, and
Mhm.
she has some vehicles in her name. And my client also knows where she has at least 2 bank accounts. So I think we
Good.
probably will be able to get
Mhm.
some of the money, if not all of the money. So that part is not as contentious as one would think. And hopefully we'll be able to collect on that within the year, we would hope. But
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, that's excellent. Congratulations on that. It just seems really awful that the man couldn't use his vehicle for the last 3 or 4 years or whatever. Um, yeah, wasn't there some sort of, like, negligence on a part of the DMV? Like, how could they be so easily persuaded by someone just saying like, "Oh, I lost my title," or whatever she did to lie to them?
well, as I understand it, the problem is the DMV, they don't really go behind and check that kind of thing. The form that she filled out is a standard application for loss of duplicate title, and she just has to check the box that she no longer has the title and check the box as to why. DMV takes her word for it. I think she paid like a $5 or $10 fee for the application. They process it. They don't check behind it to see if she's actually lost it. The problem is obviously that once DMV in North Carolina processed the lost title, then it showed up in the National Title Registry, which reported back in Nevada where my client's title was, and that's resulted in his Nevada title being canceled. And he was not going to be able to go through the court system to really resolve that, not in Nevada at least.
Okay, I see. Okay, how interesting. Well, I did want to put up your website just in case anybody wanted more information, or who knows if someone out there is in North Carolina and needs an attorney
Thank
around
you.
like do you go to all the counties in North Carolina?
I have cases pending over a wide swath of North Carolina. I've got cases pending in, matter of fact, I'm working on a lawsuit to file in Wilmington. I've got cases in Gastonia, Charlotte, Raleigh, all around. One of the things about consumer law is there's not really many attorneys who do that work. So I literally get calls from people all over the state, emails constantly. So obviously, depending on the facts and circumstances, it's not uncommon for me to have a case that's 2, 3 hours away from Greensboro. But obviously, because of COVID and technology, there's a lot of ways to handle cases that are far away from you without having to go to court as often.
Mhm. I see. Okay. And would you like to go ahead and talk to our viewers about your background, like where you grew up and what made you go to law school?
Sure, I'll try and give you the truncated version of that if I can. I was born in North Carolina, but we moved to New York, to Brooklyn, when I was about 1 year old. And we were there until the mid 80s. My family moved back to New Bern, which is really home for me. So went to undergrad at UNC Greensboro, great place, love that place. My office is 10 minutes from campus now.
Mhm.
And I've served as an active alum with the university in many roles over the years, but went to law school at Carolina, did that stint for 3 years, came back. And so as I began with a solo practitioner after I got licensed to practice in 96, worked for that solo for about 4 or 5 months. Then I went to work with another solo practitioner who did primarily personal injury and workers' comp practice. Did that for about 3 years. Then I went to work for a firm, which was that was probably the biggest launching point in my career, in the sense that the mentorship and the resources and opportunity that I had, I really was hired as an associate to do personal injury and civil litigation. But because I was the lowest person on a totem pole, whenever something came in that was et cetera or unusual, it kind of fell across my desk to figure out what it was, whether there was a way to make some money or represent the client. And that's really how I got into doing consumer law work, because of two specific cases that got put on my desk. One was a bad car case. The other was a internet watch case. And the internet watch case is kind of interesting in the sense that a gentleman in a county in Western North Carolina had gone online, saw a very expensive watch they wanted to purchase. And the seller apparently was a rogue seller, unfortunately, unbeknownst to my client. He went online and he got information as far as wiring the money to the seller to purchase this watch. And my client was going to wire the money from his bank. But before he did that, he went to the bank, he gave them the wiring instructions, told them the deal, and he actually asked the bank rep if they thought that this account was in fact legitimate. And more importantly, the seller told him that the money would be deposited into the account and would be held there for 10 days so that my client could get the watch, see if he liked it, and if not, return it without any penalty or losing the money. So my client went to the bank rep and asked them if they were sure that that money, once it went into the account, would not be taken. They assured my client that would be the case, wired the money, and as luck would have it, unfortunately, 2 days after the money was deposited into this account, it was taken out. My client never got the watch.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the seller was overseas and outside of our jurisdiction. It would have been very expensive. So we wound up filing suit against the bank for negligent misrepresentation and telling my client and assuring him that his money was going to be secured once they wired it to this international account. Fortunately, we were able to get that case resolved fairly early on for the client. And so that was the first time I'd really litigated anything outside of just a regular car accident case or a workers' comp case. And it was interesting to me. And then the other case was a used car case. And so when I left the firm in December of 2005 and opened my own practice, I was fortunate enough to take a few cases with me that I would be working on at the firm. But then I began to delve into consumer law, because I was going to be opening my own office. And I've just been really fortunate and blessed to have as many opportunities to work on different consumer cases from then, which has been '06 until now.
Wow. And do you do those cases mostly on a contingency fee basis?
It depends. One of the good things about consumer law is that there's a lot of these ABC statutes, as in like federal statutes and some state statutes that actually allow for attorney's fees.
Mm-hmm.
So in those cases, if you have a claim in which you're entitled to attorney's fees, you don't necessarily have to take it on contingent fee because there's always a prospect that you may be able to get your fees awarded to you. But still, you have to make a calculated decision about the nature of the case, what's going to be involved, number of hours involved. And so a lot of my cases, I do some of them on contingency, but what I found to be works better for me is I try to come up with some semi-reasonable estimate in the number of hours I'm going to put into the case. And I carve out a flat amount that the client is to pay me over time, but that flat amount is a portion of the fee, with the other portion being contingent. And then
Mm-hmm.
also, if there's any attorney's fees that are to be awarded or that I actually obtain, then those are credited against whatever fees that I would have earned with the client. So the contingent fee arrangement can be very dicey if you've got a case where you don't have statutory attorney's fees at play
Mm-hmm.
and you anticipate doing a lot of work. Because at the end of the day, the attorney's time is their stock in trade. And to
Yep.
burn 20, 30 hours on a case to get nothing for it is just really tough. For example, this case that I just tried that I just told you about, we got the jury verdict. I went back and logged my time, and I had about 38 hours in the case over a 2.5 year period. And that was actually low because over most of the period of time, we didn't do any discovery. It was just dead time. But that's not uncommon to have 30, 40, 50 hours, especially in the case where you've got depositions involved and you've got extensive discovery. So you have to account for a way that you're going to get paid and be able to sustain yourself in doing those cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And then in some cases, you also have to do mediation too, or arbitration before you can get a real trial. So
Correct.
yeah. Okay, so interesting. So what made you go to law school then? Did you have role models or people in your family that were also in the legal field?
I didn't have the benefit, if you will, of lawyers in the family, at least not that I was aware of at the time. Ironically, since I graduated and and started practicing, I learned that I have one cousin who's about 5 years older than me, who was a lawyer and got out of practicing because she got tired of the day to day. But so now she's a hospital administrator. But at the time I
Mhm.
went to law school, it wasn't because I had any role models. Really, the genesis for me going to law school was kind of a personal experience with my father. Like I said, I grew up in New York to some extent. And we were in New York in the late '70s and the early '80s. And my dad was on the New York City Transit Police Department. And
Mhm.
this was a time where they were just beginning to integrate a lot of governmental forces and entities. And there were next to no Asians or Latinos who were on the force. There were very few African Americans who were on the force. And so my father was one of the few African Americans who was in his specific division or area. And so, as I understand it, like in the federal government, a lot of times if you want to get a promotion, you have to take a civil service exam and you have to pass a requisite score. And so, as I understand it, I'm kind of reconstructing this because I'm very young at the time, but as I understand it, that my father and a bunch of other officers took the civil service exam for a promotion. And before the test was given, the passing score was announced that you would have to make to get the promotion. And officers across the city took the exam. And then after the results were posted, the passing score was elevated or raised. And ironically, it was raised such that none of the minority officers scored the requisite score to get their promotions. And so my father joined with some other officers to actually file a class action lawsuit against the city and the police department. And I remember being very young, going with my dad to his lawyer's office, and I could see the emotion in his face and the toll was taking on him having to go through this and still work there. And at the end of the day, there was a settlement. and there was a resolution. He got the promotion he was entitled to, but it was that experience and then some others that really kind of motivated me to kind of get into law and the way that you can help people and empower them by bringing life to the rules and the laws that are on the books. That was just probably the most poignant example of why I wanted to go to law school in the first place.
Mhm. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so what was it like going to UNC Law School and how did you pay for it?
Oh wow, it was law school. Wherever you go is a fishbowl of many things. You have a lot of pressure. You have the environment, new people. I was really fortunate and blessed in the sense that I did not have to pay a dime to go to law school at Carolina. I
Oh,
was fortunate enough to get two scholarships that covered the
wow.
entire cost of me going, which is one of the reasons why I'm so committed to giving back to younger lawyers and mentoring them, because I
Mhm.
feel like I have a debt that I need to continue to pay to the state of North Carolina and to lawyers coming before me. The law school experience, the first year was intense, but I will say that I was able to kind of push back and not get totally burnt out, get downtrodden and depressed about where I fell into class. And then by the second year, by virtue of having some really good mentors as 2Ls and 3Ls, and the benefit of some outlines and some guidance, I managed to understand that it was a process. Law school is about processes and people. So you learn the process as to what you need to do to be very efficient, to learn the material, do the best you can on the tests and exams, but also relationships with people, with professors and colleagues. And so I will say that I've been fortunate enough to make many friends in law school, some of which are now judges, prosecutors, and other persons across the spectrum. So
Mhm. Oh, okay. Yeah, excellent. And so, was your previous firm Ward and Black, or were Janice, or what's
yes,
Janet Ward
yeah,
Black?
it
Okay.
was well actually it was Donaldson and Black
Oh,
at the
yeah, yeah,
time. So, and I think that was about the time that I met you, Judy. We were
yeah.
both at what was the North Carolina Academy of Trial Lawyers at that point.
Hmm.
And Janet Ward Black was a partner who was partner firm, was heavily active in the Academy of Trial Lawyers. And Art Donaldson, the other partner, had been active in the organization as well. So that was that was the firm that I was with for about, I think about 5 years. I was with that firm, and so that's how we got connected. That's how I met so many other really good trial lawyers and colleagues across the state of North Carolina, with whom I'm in contact with and get referrals from and give referrals to and advice to this day.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. You have to get out there and do the networking and try to get yourself known. And it looks like from your website that you have spoken at a lot of different continuing legal ed seminars and other events.
I have. I get asked to speak on primarily consumer law topics now, but when I first started doing public talking, it was mainly more personal injury context. When I was doing more personal injury work, I actually was doing a lot of work with the thorny issue of Medicaid and Medicare liens and workers' comp liens. And for a
Mhm.
couple of years, I actually wrote the paper that Lawyers Mutual posted on their website as the help guide for people who had questions about liens and reimbursement and settlement issues. But from doing that work, and once I started doing more consumer work around 2006, I've lectured to some community groups, but also lawyers and seminars about specific topics, primarily auto fraud, unfair harassing debt collection. And while I enjoy speaking and doing seminars, what I really enjoy is mentoring and working one on one with lawyers who have specific cases, specific problems, and helping them work through those.
Mhm. Yes, yes, you've been very generous with your time and, sharing things on the listserv and just talking to people. So that's really amazing. But can you tell us a little bit about what it was like starting your own law practice? And was it scary or kind of, financially risky?
Well, yeah, and you could probably write the primer on this. You could probably write the
I've
book
talked
on this,
about it a lot
Judy.
on my channel, but now I want to hear from some other attorneys because I'm sure the viewers are tired of hearing my story. So
Oh no,
that's why
no, not at
you're here.
all. So I was really fortunate in the sense that when I started my own firm, I was able to bring cases with me. I realized that a lot of people don't have the benefit of that. They may be right out of law school, or they may be leaving a firm and they have no cases. So they have to gin up whatever and clients and relationships. But fortunately, when I left Donaldson and Black, I think the bar requires that when you leave a firm that you have to send out a letter to the clients to have them decide if they want you to remain as their lawyer, or if they want to remain with the firm that you're leaving. And the vast majority of clients were gracious enough to allow me to continue working on the cases. And so I was able to work out an arrangement with Donaldson and Black where I took those cases with me, finished out the work, and we split the fee in a fair amount. But that was helpful because it did give me the income and the revenue to rent office space, to begin advertising, to pay for malpractice insurance, all the overhead that people don't really think about when you're working in a firm or office, the things that the office manager covers, that the partners cover, those are now out of your pocket. Those are on your mind. You have to figure those things out. So I was fortunate enough, between the cases I brought with me and then with the connections I made since I've been with the firm, and otherwise people giving me cases or giving me work, it all kind of came together. And I was to a point probably about 2 or 3 years in my practice where I totally finished all of my Donaldson and Black work and had plenty of work coming in of my own. And so that was a really good starting point. And it's just really mushroomed from there. Because one of the things I've found is that people often go for the point of least resistance. And the reason I say that is because there's so many people chasing down car accident cases. There's so many people who want to do just criminal district court practice. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a huge niche or niche areas out there for people who want to do estate administration, estate planning, bankruptcy. And if you start thinking about some of the areas of North Carolina, for example, where there are few lawyers in general, few lawyers who do certain topics. Like I'm currently in New Bern, which is at my mother's house. It's about 3 hours from Greensboro. New Bern is about an hour and a half from Raleigh. It's an hour and a half from Wilmington. It's 45 minutes from Greenville. And while there are lawyers in each of those places, that's a lot of territory where people don't have lawyers who handle bankruptcy. They don't have a lot of lawyers who do auto fraud or harassing debt collection work. There's a lot of opportunity for people who are willing to step outside of some of the larger geographical areas and some of the practice areas where there's not as many attorneys practicing in those areas, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I mean, in terms of consumer law, I think I know of one attorney in Raleigh that handles like lemon law cases or auto,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because I get calls every so often from people who are screwed over by auto dealerships.
Mm-hmm.
Like the other day, I got a call from someone who said he bought a car online and
Uh,
he still hasn't received a title, and the company is in another state. What does he
mm-hmm.
do? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't handle consumer law. I never learned that niche area of law, so I referred
Mm-hmm.
him to this car guy that I know in Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, what kind of consumer law cases do you see most frequently?
That one that you raised, that's a current hot topic issue.
Mhm.
And
Online vehicle
yes,
sales.
well,
Mhm.
and the issue with not getting the title, because
Mhm.
as you probably have heard, Carvana has the vending machine up on the
Yeah,
Beltline in Raleigh. Well,
yeah.
that vending machine is shut down. They're not allowed to operate any sales until I believe sometime next month,
Really?
because
Oh.
they were selling people cars and not delivering titles. And it's
Mhm.
happened there in Raleigh. I've been getting a lot of calls from people who bought cars in Charlotte and other places. So that is a ongoing issue. But I get a lot of calls from people who buy a used car that has mechanical issues after they bought it. I get calls from people who have purchased a vehicle and they were either the vehicle's history was misrepresented to them, or the
Mhm.
terms of the financing were misrepresented to them. And there's a whole lot in between. And as far as unfair and harassing debt collection, there are rules on how debt collectors can contact you what they can do in terms of collecting on a debt and the number of calls they can make, the nature of the calls. There are rules in place. And some people just, they capitulate. When they get a phone call, when they get a letter in the mail, they just respond. They agree to make payments. They commit themselves to things they should not commit themselves to. And a lot of times I don't get the call until after they've been sued. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because at that point, at least you have the legal presence. You can create some timelines and some buffers in place. But consumer law is a huge, huge umbrella. And the few categories that I cover probably barely scratch the surface. I don't do any bankruptcy work. I do not do any mortgage work or foreclosure prevention work. There are people who do RESPA work, which is fraud related to real estate closings and transactions. So again, there's a wide variety of consumer law work that's available. If you think about it, most people have a car in North Carolina because the public transit is not what it is like in Boston and New York or LA. Some people, that's the most expensive purchase they ever make in their life, is a vehicle. Some people are blessed to be able to buy a car. But at the end of the day, everybody is a consumer. You're buying something. You're making payments on something at some point in your life. And the rules of the road on most of those things. And unless you take the time to learn and understand those rules, you fall mercy to and prey to those who have these contracts and have these arbitration clauses and impose these conditions on you and tell you what you have to do and when you have to do it and how much you have to pay. And I enjoy representing people who are on the bad side of that and want to try and even the playing field. They just want to be fair. I will say that about every 10 cases that I get calls about, I have to turn down probably 8 or 9 of those. Half of them because the person does not have a case legally speaking, but the other half because they just don't have the bandwidth to represent all of them.
Yeah, and with the people with the used cars, isn't that kind of like a loser case? Because when you buy something used from somebody, it's kind of like buyer beware, and they had the opportunity to get the car inspected anyway, right?
That's usually, and so Judy, you kind of are making the same argument that most dealers make. Most dealers, when they
Buyer
sell the
beware.
car, yeah, buyer beware. They have you sign as is,
Yeah.
no warranty disclaimer, and they think end of story. Well, there are ways around that. There's no question about that. I'm a member of the National Consumer Lawyers Group, the National Association of Consumer Advocates, and ironically, tomorrow is our 2021 convention. It's supposed to
Right.
be in person, but it's now going to be all virtual.
Good.
And I believe there's a seminar tomorrow morning talking about ways around the as is disclaimer in used car sales. And that topic is one that gets talked about every year at our convention, because there are ways around, even if you are sold a vehicle as is, that does not prevent you from for example, from making a claim for fraud.
Yeah.
So if somebody intentionally misrepresents a vehicle to you in very specific detail, they can't hide behind the as is disclaimer that they had you sign. And there are even times when you sign the as is disclaimer, so to speak, but it may not be legally binding. So there's actually a white paper within the Consumer Lawyers Group. I think it's titled 15 Ways Around the As Is Disclaimer in Used Car Sales. So there is hope in some of those cases, but sometimes it takes a while to pull apart the pieces and see if and to what extent you have remedies there.
I see. Okay, well then that's great to know. I mean, see, that's why people need a specialist, right? Instead of just somebody to be like, oh well, you said you bought it as is, so you're screwed. So that's
Yeah,
it.
we don't want you thinking that. We want you to at least reach out for help.
Yeah. Well, one of our viewers, I think he's a law student, says, John, are bankruptcy and consumer protection a good practice combo?
I think they are. They really feed into each other. One of my good colleague friends in Charlotte does primarily bankruptcy work. He started doing consumer protection work, then got into bankruptcy because he came from a large firm in Alabama where he was working on the other side. He was doing bankruptcy protection for businesses. So then he moved to Charlotte and opened his own firm and began doing personal bankruptcy. So the key is that with bankruptcy cases, and I don't do any bankruptcy work, but I've been around enough bankruptcy lawyers to know that when you're listing the debts, accounting for the debts, figuring out how to resolve them, in the bankruptcy cases, when the client brings you their information, you look at their documents and correspondence, you can find consumer law violations. You can find issues with the financing on the loan. You can find issues with failure to disclose fees. You can find issues with the way that the debt collector went about collecting on the debt. You can even find, I have a case right now that was referred to me by a bankruptcy lawyer where a person has been sued on a debt that by North Carolina standards, the statute of limitations is expired. But I think what's happening is that the debt was incurred in New York, and the lawyers believe that the New York statute of limitations applies here, which allows them to file suit. But I've already run that argument up the flagpole about 5 years ago in Western North Carolina, and the court was pretty clear that when you file here, you're subject to the 3-year statute of limitations. So the point being is that a lot of bankruptcy attorneys, they have gold mines in their caseload that if they learned about debt collection issues, FDCPA, we have a State Debt Collection Act, there are ways that you can protect your clients. So those two feed off each other. If you have a bankruptcy practice, you should be in contact with a consumer protection lawyer and vice versa if you're not handling both areas.
Okay, great. Well, we have another viewer who says he wants to become a criminal defense lawyer in Jamaica. Okay. Well, I don't know what the legal system is like in Jamaica. Isn't it like the British system? But
I have no idea, and I don't know that I can really speak to that one way. I will leave that to you, Judy.
well, it's kind of like I didn't do criminal defense. I interned with public defenders' offices as a law student. And I mean, it is very interesting, but I can see that it would also be pretty exhausting too, and kind of low paying, especially at first, if you're a public defender. Did you ever do criminal defense? I think you mentioned working for some other firms that might have
Yeah,
done a little.
I've never done full-time criminal defense. There have been times where I've actually handled a criminal case. For example, one of the bane of some of the prosecutors' existence in North Carolina is that when you go to rent furniture from a furniture store, if you don't return the furniture to the store, or if you fall behind on the payments, the furniture store, the rental store, will take out a criminal summons against you and have you charged for failure to return rental property. And a lot of times they do that because they're using it as leverage to make you pay whatever you allegedly owe under the contract. And I've talked with some of the prosecutors in some counties, and they do not like prosecuting those cases because inevitably the failure to the rent to own people, they often will not show up in court. And when they do, the state is kind of in equivocal position as to whether or not they're going to prosecute. But the point being is that criminal defense is something you really want to get with a mentor. If you're interested in doing it in Jamaica, you need to find a criminal defense lawyer in Jamaica and ask them questions about how they got into it. It's something where each jurisdiction is different in terms of the state or the county, and you have to get with somebody who does that to teach you the lay of the land. I am not that person, unfortunately.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, and we have another viewer here who is thinking about law school. Hi, Serena. She says, "Hi, Mr. O'Neill. Thanks for sharing. I wonder how COVID might have either positively or negatively impacted your consumer law practice. If
Yeah,
so, in what
Serena,
ways?"
hello. That's a really good question. And I think Judy probably could answer that as well. On the consumer law side, a lot of what consumer lawyers do is either in federal court, or if it's in state court in North Carolina, a lot of it doesn't go to trial. It gets resolved. So a lot of the work that I do, which really affords me the ability to work from home, is by phone, by fax, by email. It's remote. There are times when I have to appear in court, maybe for a motions hearing, but that's somewhat infrequent. And during COVID, I do know that a lot of the courts were doing their motions hearings virtually. So they would send a Zoom link just like we're on now, and counsel could appear by Zoom to make their arguments. If there were briefs or documents to be sent in, those would be emailed. For a while, there were no trials, obviously, because they hadn't figured out how to do that with COVID. Now we're back in North Carolina, and most places having jury trials. I don't know if that's going to change with this new Omicron variant, but I would think overall, COVID has not negatively impacted my practice. If anything, it's probably given people time to think about where they are and issues that they've had brewing or they've not resolved. And now they're reaching out for help. And as far as getting the cases handled and moved along, I can fortunately say I've not seen any real drop off in that so far.
Mhm. Yeah. I think when COVID first started affecting us back in what was around March of 2020, I
Mm-hmm.
did see that my business went down a little bit. And but then ultimately, we got all these like new procedures done, as John mentioned, when the court started setting up WebEx, and we were doing more hearings through WebEx, which I love, especially
Me
for
too.
divorce cases. Yeah, you don't have to drive all the way to a courthouse, get all dressed up, and then sit around the courtroom for 2 hours, hoping that you might get called. Instead, it's just like so much easier and efficient, and saves the environment because we're not all driving to downtown Raleigh or to the courthouse to do stuff. So I really like that. And then also, I'm pretty much doing all my initial client consultations by Zoom,
Wow.
um, either that or phone. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that most people also like that too, because they don't
Mm-hmm.
have to drive all the way to my office and take more time out of their workday to meet with me. So it's kind of like a good new situation now that everybody's using technology to interact and try to conduct things as much as possible remotely instead of in person. So, and then of course, some people ask me, well, what about the stress on marriages or more custody battles because people were sick and tired of like being, stuck at home so much with their spouses. And I did see a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of that since I do family law as a significant portion of my practice now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but I think things are sort of back to normal in terms of the caseload. Like people are still getting married or getting divorced or having
Mm-hmm.
custody problems or having employment problems. So in terms of my practice, I mean, it did kind of like hurt my business a little bit, but I'm still in practice and still have an office, but I try not to go to the real office as much.
Yeah,
So,
Judy, you and I talked a little bit before we got on the call about the fact that we both have the luxury, I guess, of not having to go to the physical office as much anymore because of you know technology and the way it's helped us. So there may have been a slight downtick in my business when COVID hit. I think that was just a general reaction to people now getting used to things closing down. What am I going to do? Am I going to be working?
mhm.
But I, honestly, for the last year and a half, I can't say that I've seen any significant downturn in the business. If anything, things have increased for me. It's unfortunate because I think with the economy being what it is, I've noticed people are taking advantage of opportunities to take money out of people's pocket more now than they used to, and more brazenly in that regard.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so Serena has another question. Do you think technology in the virtual world will impact legal practice going forward? Do you believe lawyers and paralegals will somewhat be replaced by technology? I would say yes, because I've already been seeing it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, I really like doing things by Zoom and WebEx now. It's so much easier. It's totally worth the cost for whatever my Zoom subscription is. It's probably like $200 or 250 a year to have a Zoom account.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know some friends who have virtual assistants, and one of my friends is an immigration attorney, and she hires people that are in Honduras to work as her
Wow.
personal assistants for her law practice. And she says they're really great. They speak English just fine, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't charge as much. So yeah. What about you? I mean, have you been able to save money through technology?
I will say I have, like you said, just the mere fact that you don't have to burn your time and money driving to go to court out of county. If you think about it, I mean, Judy, you're in Raleigh. If you
Mhm.
have to go down to Charlotte for a 30-minute motion on a Monday morning, you're contemplating spending at least half of your day. That's like a 3-hour trip one way, 3 hours back. So basically, you burn your entire day versus, like you said, with technology, you have the Zoom subscription cost. And when you're using the court system, the court platform doesn't cost you anything. So you go online, log in. So you're saving time and money. So the answer to Serena's first question, I think it's going to have a positive effect. I realize that we are losing some of the personal connection. And unfortunately, as we get around the holiday season, I think that some people have been using COVID as an excuse to stay isolated or maybe not as connect as much as they should. But for what we do for a living, I think it really helps efficiency, and you can still get your work done. You can still connect with the clients. You can still exchange documents. The latter question, I don't think lawyers are going to be replaced by technology. I don't think paralegals will be. I think probably the better way to state that is that some aspects of what we do are going to be automated and made better. And maybe you won't need as much lawyer time. Maybe you won't need as much paralegal time to get things accomplished. But at the end of the day, it's still a human system. I don't think you're going to be able to replace that totally with technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And then Valentino wants to know, why did you not choose a career in big law? Do you
Wow.
want
I
to
don't
answer
that was never really a big option for me. I guess I never had an idea or ambition to work in a big firm because I never really could identify with the type of work they were doing. Now, honestly, I think most people could identify maybe with the lifestyle that comes with big law in terms of the money and the supposed prestige and the travel and all that. But unfortunately, I think there's a lot of the big law myth has been dispelled. And what I've noticed is I've known Judy a long time. And when I first met Judy in the Academy of Trial Lawyers, a lot of our friends worked not necessarily in big law, but worked in larger firms. And over the years, I've seen most of my friends and colleagues leave those large firms and create their own solo practice. But as far as why I didn't do career in big law, it doesn't resonate with me. I don't want to represent companies. I don't want to represent big businesses. I'm on the side of the consumer, the little person, and that doesn't mesh with what big law does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And plus, I guess you were really privileged to have full scholarships to go to law school. That's so incredible. I didn't even know, you had these prestigious scholarships to go to UNC. So I guess that kept your options open where you didn't feel like you had to chase big law jobs to pay down your loans.
It did. I mean, that can't be, stated enough. I mean, it's really important not to be facing six-figure overhead when you're getting your degree as you cross the stage at, law school. So that really did open up opportunities for me. Even if I had the loan overhead, I probably would have tried to find a job working at legal aid or somewhere in the public sector that would have presumably at that time had some type of loan forgiveness or loan payback. But I was really fortunate not to have to make that decision and still yet not having to join big law. Of course, big law is not even as big as it used to be anymore. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, what do you think of big law? Well, that's an interesting question. I don't know if we want to be on the record for that, but big
uh,
law is usually good for people to help pay off their law school debt if you can get such a job. But I think even at a school at like UNC Law School, it's probably still like the top 5 or 10% that even get a shot at big law, like true big law firms that are international as opposed to bigger regional or southern law firms.
Yeah, Judy, I think you're on point. If you think about it, especially the smaller the law school in terms of national profile. I mean, Carolina is obviously a flagship school here in the state, and it does have some reputation outside of the state. But if you're at NYU, if you're at Harvard or Columbia, one of those places, those are the places where big law recruits people from. And like you said, though, there are a very small percentage of lawyers here who work for big law. Big law does certain things. Big law is meant to represent companies and corporations. It's what they do. They do it well. They scale up. They have the staff, the resources. They commit to that. And even though I'm a consumer lawyer, I'm not saying that all businesses are bad. I think that any business that operates with a profit motive but has a conscience and follows the rules and does the right thing, I'm plenty good with that. And if they're lawyers who are going to assist them in doing that, I'm all for that. Is big law worth it? If you're saying the money, I think you have to make a really, really important decision about that. And I think Judy could probably speak to that better than I can. And the reason I say that is because if you have a family, you have to really think about weighing the time considerations, that the time constraints that big law expects from you, the money you're going to make, the hours they want you to work, travel. I mean, what do you think about that question, Judy?
Mhm.
What would your response be?
Yeah. Well, my ex-husband went to Yale Law School and he worked for a very big,
Mm,
prestigious law firm in DC before he
hmm
became a professor at UNC. So that's
mm,
why we moved here.
hmm
Um, and he just felt very unfulfilled working for
mm,
that big law firm. And many times he would have to work till 10 o'clock at night when we lived in the DC area. Sometimes he'd be told to just like pack up and fly out to London or fly up to New York City, but he couldn't
mm,
even have fun. It was no fun at all. You're just stuck there in the office the whole day and night and
mm,
barely have even any time to go back to your hotel to sleep. So,
mm,
even though it sounds so prestigious because you're jet setting across the
mm,
country or the world, but most of my friends that did do big law, they either quit or they got basically laid off or fired after less than 3 to 5 years. And my old classmates at Georgetown, the ones that did become partners at some big firms like around California or New
mhm.
York, they're all men. So I don't know. I
Wow.
mean, I think that usually means that, you're not going to really have much life to take care of children if your goal in life is also to have a family and have children. Like I think most of those men are either, you know, they're either single or divorced or they have a housewife who's taking care of the
Mhm,
kids or they're gay and don't
mhm.
don't want to have a traditional family with kids.
I think that those are all good points. I think when you talk about big law, I guess the theory is that it used to be the theory when we came out of law school that you would go to big law, you would work the 4 to 6 year period, and then you would eventually become a partner. And as I understand the big law model now, they have tiered partnership. So you can become a non-equity partner, so you don't have as much requirement to bring in revenue, and maybe you don't have as much of a requirement to meet hours, but you're still working a lot of hours. You still are really at their disposal. And I think what I've heard from a lot of people who work at big law is that they work there, they make really good money, but at some point they are not fulfilled because either they do not have the time to really spend the money and the time with the people they want to spend it with, or the work that they're doing, they don't feel like they're really making a difference, or it just does not fit with their personality. And so it could be that the way people leverage big laws that they do it for a period of time so they can earn income and make contacts, and then they escape. They do their own thing, whether it be practicing law with another firm, opening their own firm, or just doing something totally different. But I think the answer to that question depends on you and what you want out of life and whether big law is going to allow you to do that.
Yeah. Actually, I just thought of one woman that I know who is a partner at a very big law firm around Chicago. We went to college together, and just out of
Mhm.
curiosity, I Googled her a while back. So I think she went to Columbia or some, Ivy League type law school after Berkeley.
Wow.
And then, it sounds like she does have children and she's married, but I mean, she's got to have a nanny, because I don't see how anybody can be a partner at a humongously big law firm. You're getting paid really, really well, but you have to work those long hours and potentially travel, and your
Mhm.
schedule could be unpredictable. So I think a lot of people that succeed in big law, if they do have children, they have to have a lot of family support, a stay-at-home spouse, or hire nannies to take care of their kids.
One thing I'll mention is that to the extent you've gotten these questions from people about the big law model, and it may be worth it to you to reach out to some of your colleagues and see if one of them would be willing to come on and answer those questions directly. Because I'm
I
just
don't
kind of
know.
surmising, but
Yeah, yeah. I have asked some of my friends who worked in big law and went to Ivy League law schools, worked for the federal government, prestigious jobs, in-house counsel. But unfortunately, they all said no, they can't be on the show because
okay.
they can't like say anything really candidly, or it's not
Wow.
proper for government lawyers to get on the show or say
Hmm.
anything. Yeah, so they're just concerned about what image they have to uphold and confidentiality and not saying anything that could be construed as representing their employer. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so it is hard to get the straight up, straight talk from people who are in the trenches of the legal profession. Yeah.
Wow.
So Serena asked, what advice do you have for people who consider going to law school? I'm a New York City paralegal thinking about law school as I value the experience and potential career opportunities.
Great question, Serena. And as it's interesting you ask me that, because one of the things that I've done, my office, like I said, is 10 minutes away from my undergraduate, UNCG. And so over the years, I've mentored a lot of different college students who've been interested in going to law school. Some eventually went, some did not. And I have a couple of professors at the university. I've got an open dialogue with them if they have any students who are interested in law school and just want to ask questions. They want to have a conversation, that they're open to talk with me about that. So if you're interested in going to law school, you have to think about the why and how. So obviously the why is, what do you plan to do with your law degree? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to practice, because there are people who go to law school because they want to work in academia, they want to teach. They want to go into government service. I mean, I can't really speak to all the non-traditional career paths after law school, but I know that they exist. So you want to think about why you're going to law school, and the how part is really important. Like Judy kind of hit on before, how are you going to finance law school? If you are married and have a family, how are you going to balance that? You know, North Carolina Central Law School has a program, I believe, is part-time, so that instead of you having to go through a 3-year full-time experience, I believe you can get your law degree in 4 years, maybe closer to
Mhm.
5, perhaps, because it allows you to work and take classes. But the traditional law school is 3 years. And really, like they say, you can't work your first year of law school. The second year, they don't really recommend it. So you're looking at probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years, where you're not really going to be able to work. So how are you going to finance your law school experience? How are you going to finance your life? How much overhead are you going to have when you come out of law school? And so if you, I mean, and I'm inviting you, Serena, and anybody else who's on this, broadcast, if you have specific questions about law school and things you've been thinking about, or you've heard about it and you want to know whether it's true, not true, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can go to my website and you can get my phone number. You can email me. I talk to students all the time, or people interested in law school. I want to be very honest with them about my experience. And I've actually connected people with colleagues and friends of mine. If I don't have the answer, if I can't speak to that, I'm glad to put you in touch with somebody who can, hopefully.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. That's very generous of you because, sometimes I just feel overwhelmed and just flat out say I just don't have time to keep talking to people directly, because doing this YouTube channel, I do get a bunch of like unsolicited emails and phone calls even from people. So, but that's very generous of you. Thank you.
You do
Well,
great
what
work,
about
Judy. This is a great vehicle, by the way. I
Mhm.
definitely have to give you a thumbs up for creating this YouTube channel and giving people a chance to ask these questions.
Sure, thank you, and it's also thanks to guests like you who are willing to, come on a show when you could be relaxing watching sports on a Sunday night, to answer these questions and get dressed up too, so
No problem, Judy. Glad
yeah.
to do it.
But, you said that you grew up a little bit in New York City, right? So
Mhm.
did you ever think about going back to New York for law school or going there to practice?
No, I'm glad that I grew up in New York, because I did at an early age learn the world was so much bigger than just Raleigh. or
Mhm.
Charlotte or New Bern. And the reason I say that is because when I was in elementary school, I went to school with students, who were from Japan, Azerbaijan, Russia, Kenya. I mean, you learn how to, you learn about different cultures, you learn about different people. And in New York, you learn how real insignificant you are in the grand scheme of things. When you're walking down the sidewalk and there's tons of people walking shoulder to shoulder with you. But I had no desire to go back to New York to live and work, even though I probably could, because the pace of life there and the cost of living is just so much to keep up with. And ironically, I think only one of my friends in my law school class who was from New York, they came down here to law school at Carolina, only one of them went back. The
Oh,
rest of them either wound up staying in North Carolina to practice, or they went deeper south, or they went other places. And I think that indirectly, in my talking to them, I learned that the quality of life, especially if you're going to begin a career in the law, is really important. So if you're now getting out of law school and you're putting yourself in the pressure cooker of living in New York, having to deal with the traffic, the hustle, the bustle, the huge cost of living,
yeah.
that can be a lot to deal with. Some
Mhm.
people are equipped to do it, but life is short. And if you can find a way to be fulfilled and have less stress, more power to you. You got to find that.
Mhm. Great, thank you. Just a ending question, is there any particular case or moment in your career that you are particularly proud of? I should have
Wow.
prepared you for this question. Yeah,
Yeah,
'cause you
that's like the
practiced
good.
for so long, so I'm sure there were many, like, great triumphs at the courthouse where your client was hugging you and thanking you or, where you felt really good about winning
Yeah,
something.
I've been really fortunate to gotten some really good results for clients over the years. There's no one particular that stands out. I think if anything, the fact that I'm able to help different people, and I do have some clients who still reach out to me years later about something that comes up in their life, even if it's something I can't handle or that I can't help them with. Fact that they either referred somebody to me or they reach back out to me, that's important to me because it makes me feel that I'm having a difference and impact in people's lives. Because at the end of the day, that's why I went to law school. That's why I still do what I do. That's what motivates me every day to get up and keep doing what I'm doing, even on the weekends when I work.
Mhm. That's great. Okay. Well, we're almost at the 1 hour mark, and I don't see any other questions here. People are saying thank you for being here. Many thanks, Mr. O'Neill and Judy, wishing you the happiest of
Oh,
holidays.
thanks, Serena.
Thank
You
you,
too.
Serena.
We appreciate you.
Yeah. Good luck to you, and good luck on the LSAT if you're going to be taking that soon. So,
Definitely.
yeah. Okay. Well, John, why don't you hang on for a couple more minutes, but I'll
Okay.
go ahead and end the broadcast. So,
Glad
thanks
to.
everybody for being here.